SMU political science professor Matthew Wilson. Thank you so much. We appreciate it.
Well, thanks for having me.
So let's talk about President Biden's executive actions as it relates to immigration. Two in the past several weeks. One, really cracking down on the asylum rules. And then this latest one, really providing protections for people who came into this country illegally, but who've been here for 10 years and who married U.S. citizens. So what's going on here?
These are really two moves in opposite directions on the immigration question. The first, and the more significant in terms of border control, really was in response to the widespread public perception that there's chaos at the southern border. And this had become a real political liability for Joe Biden. It was an issue where Donald Trump consistently pulled better than Biden in terms of his ability to handle the border. And so I think Biden felt like he had no choice but to act and to at least send a signal that he's taking border security more seriously. But when he did that, he got considerable pushback from people on the left flank of the Democratic Party. And so I think this liberalization of the policies for those who are married to US citizens is an attempt to tamp down some of that discontent on his left flank. And so
So,
I think that's why you're seeing these moves.
so what do you think the political ramifications are? What's the impact when it relates to the polls, do you think? Does this move the needle and help President Biden, or does it move the needle and only help former President Trump?
Well, thus far in this race, we've seen that very little moves the needle much at all. The race is really locked in, quite stable. And really, no matter what happens, no matter what either Trump or Biden does or says, they remain in the polls within a couple of points of each other. Now, all that said, whether the border crackdown helps Biden at all depends on what its effects are. 2, 3 months from now, do we see a substantially diminished number of people being essentially paroled into the United States? Can Biden point to real numbers and say, look, we really have meaningfully decreased the migrant flows with this policy? Or, as his critics say, does it turn out to all be theater and that it doesn't make a meaningful dent in the number of people coming into this country? The jury is still out on that. With regard to the liberalization for the spouses of U.S. citizens, I do think that that will help to ease some of the criticism on his left flank, but that's not really what Biden has to worry about politically. Leftists in the Democratic Party can make a lot of noise, but they're not voting for Donald Trump. And at the end of the day, they hate Donald Trump so much that it's hard to imagine them even staying home. So I think politically, Biden has more to worry about in the center of the electorate than he does on the left.
And so what do you think the key signs for, the public to look out for as it relates to the polls? I mean, is it something where how does the president score when it comes to who do people trust more on the border?
I would say people could look at two things. Yes, the polling numbers on which candidate people trust more to handle immigration and the border, but also how big an issue people think immigration and the border is. That is, it has been in the past pretty high on the list of public concerns. If it recedes a bit, if it starts to fall down that list of people's priorities in the election, that's a win for Biden. So those are the two things that I would watch in the polling data.
And, as you said, I mean, this has been a top issue nationally. In Texas, we've known it's been the top issue for for about a decade now. But
Right.
but nationally, it's also it's I think number two, right behind inflation. And so I think there is a deep concern there. You think that that's really something that we have to watch?
Absolutely. Texans have known for a long time that immigration is a big deal because we are on the front lines, along with Arizona and California and New Mexico. Those border states really are on the front lines of immigration. Only in the last few years has the reality of it started to really come home in places like New York and Chicago and Washington, D.C., as more and more migrants have started to arrive in those cities. And that's where we've really seen it become more of a major national issue. That is not something that works well for President Biden. That's not something that works well politically for Democrats. And so I think there is a lot of pressure within the Democratic Party to do something to diffuse that issue before the election in November.
And my last question is on when you look at the battleground states, because that's where this election is going to be won or lost, right? So what I've read is Trump, if he is to win, is going to need one of the three key um, states in the Rust Belt, either Pennsylvania or Wisconsin or Michigan. And so what do you say to that? I mean, which state could he possibly score the most on this issue of illegal immigration?
Well, you're exactly right. He does likely need one of those states. Even if he takes Georgia, Arizona, and Nevada, in all of which he's leading right now in the polls, that still leaves him just short of an electoral majority. So you would need to take something else. And the most likely candidates for that would be one or more of Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. Now, those are not states that are on the front line of the immigration issue. But as we said, immigration is becoming more and more of a national concern. Certainly, there are large numbers of blue collar union workers in those states, and they have some concerns about the effects of immigration on blue collar jobs. And so it could play well there. Of those states, the one that was the closest last time was Wisconsin. Wisconsin really was a razor thin margin. So it's a state where Republicans and Democrats historically have been very evenly balanced. And so you might think that that is Trump's best bet, but you could imagine scenarios where any or all of those states fall for Trump. They're that close right now.
Hmm. All right, Matthew Wilson, SMU political science professor, as always, we appreciate your insight.
Well, thanks for having me.